No, I think we're good. I think the main thing we really want to get today is a conversation going about whether there's an opportunity, whether PolicyMap with a forward-thinking Department of Health, you know, having that as on their website and taking the lead, whether it's a platform that we can utilize as a cross-sector conversation, addressing the needs that we all have in common in regards to the populations that we all serve. So we want to do that exploration, and we thank you greatly to be able to help us on, to be our navigator today. And we just got joined, Tony Kowal just joined us, and he's with Hawaii Energy. I actually introduced everybody except you want to explain to him what Hawaii Energy does. And so Tony will just give you a brief on Hawaii Energy because.
Yep. Hawaii Energy is a ratepayer-funded program under our state Public Utilities Commission. So we basically give back to the ratepayers in the form of energy efficiency type things, measures, whether it's rebates. My program in particular is one in the multifamily sector. So we go after hard-to-reach communities where we do a no-cost program where we go in and retrofit lighting and water measures like LED light bulbs, shower heads, aerators, that sort of thing, and all at no cost to the resident or the landlord. So we're always looking in underserved areas where there are opportunities where we can hopefully provide energy efficiency savings.
Thanks, Tony. Did you get that, Tom? Test at the end.
Yes, that was extremely helpful. Thank you, Tony. And I see Heather, actually a few of other folks have joined, Stephanie and Heather from Blisk, I believe. That's good. So, Ramona, I'll go ahead and get started and introduce myself. So my name is Tom Love. I'm with PolicyMap, and I work with pretty much anything that's not academic. So we have about 130 universities that subscribe to PolicyMap, and then I handle everything else. So I work with cities, I work with local, state, county, and federal agencies, nonprofits, financial institutions, corporate entities, healthcare systems. And my colleague, Taylor Harrington, is with me from our data team, and she worked with the Hawaii Department of Health on their mapping tool, which we will also show you briefly as well. And so a little background on who we are. We are a nationwide GIS data mapping tool. And we were created in 2007 as a division of Reinvestment Fund, which was one of the first CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions in the nation, founded by Jeremy Nowak. So, of course, Reinvestment Fund itself has a mission to finance affordable housing, supermarkets and food deserts, clinics, schools. They also finance energy efficiency programs as well. So very much in line with your missions. And they created PolicyMap initially out of their own need to try to pull together all this information available from all these different government websites and other sources in order to easily visualize where areas had the greatest need, where their investments could have the greatest immediate impact on underserved communities. So it was created as an internal tool back in 2007, quickly caught on with other CDFIs across the country and went national shortly thereafter. So we are now used by, many types of sources, and I'm really excited to hear the cross-section of people that are in attendance today, because we are working, trying to encourage cross-sector collaboration as well, for example, between housing and health to reduce social barriers to health and improve outcomes. So thank you again for joining today. So I think I'll actually go in reverse the way I normally show PolicyMap and start with an example of the Hawaii Department of Health's mapping tool. From there, go into the nationwide mapping tool, and then show you some examples of cities and how they're using PolicyMap, because I believe that there's also an interest in providing wider access to the tool. So you can see on the screen that we're in our PolicyMap website, policymap.com, and we have tens of thousands of data indicators from over 100 different sources that we continuously update in the PolicyMap. So an example that we mentioned earlier is HUD CDBG programs have been updated to 2018 today in PolicyMap. And so it's Taylor's team that works on all of that. And then on top of this nationwide tool, we create various mapping tools that are used for specific purposes, and that can be a combination of data that's from PolicyMap that's automatically updated in your tool, as well as local data sets that we would provide as well to supplement. So one example is this SNAP-Ed Nutrition Education mapping tool created for Hawaii Department of Health. I believe that Tammy may be on the call from Hawaii Department of Health. And this tool has been in place for about a year. And so you can see there's this website you can go to. If I scroll down, you can see that this explains a variety of sources around healthy food access in the adult environment, and then local sources such as biking and other assets. So this is a mapping tool that's interactive. You can click and drag the map. You can zoom in. You can type a specific address or a county or a city and zoom directly to that part of the state. And you can see that the data is organized in these menus in this new map menu. So you can see on the upper right, there are these three dots, so you can view this map in a new window. It's full screen. You can print whatever is visible on the map at the time. So I'm going to open this in a full screen and just zoom in for an example to Honolulu. So I'm going to zoom into Honolulu. And so you can see here we are in Honolulu. If I go to new maps, data has been organized in these categories after working, Taylor working with the client, the Department of Health. And I'm sure if you want to.
Yeah, so I'll talk about these menus a little bit and about how a widget might be used for these kinds of cross-sector conversations as well. And again, if anyone from the Department of Health or Tammy's on the phone and wants to chime in kind of about the specific use cases, that would be really helpful too. So the idea from a widget and a tool like this is that it's a really targeted instance of PolicyMap. So this is a way that you're able to really drill down on the kind of indicators you're interested in seeing in your community and keeping them really streamlined for your end users. So the Department of Health, as Tom mentioned, and as they share on their website, we're most interested in issues of health and food access, identifying these vulnerable populations, and then seeing how these populations connect to the built environment, things like transportation access, for example. So here, Tom's layered one particular data set that was requested from the Department of Health, which is finding what percentage of families are just above the poverty line, say, who are living at 125% of the poverty line. And so the way that you're seeing this data visualized on the map currently is in density based on census tracts as well. So the Department of Health requested a few different thresholds, cut points for that. We can process that data at any custom levels that you'd like. And just as in the visual right now, you can start to layer different data here with a point data set showing where locations of HUD public housing developments are built, to kind of see more information about those developments alongside this poverty data, for example.
And so here you're looking at, here's the housing sector, and then you can overlay this with going back to this menu here. For example, under transportation, we've loaded for Hawaii, the Biki stations, the bus stops, on Oahu and Maui, the rail transit lines. You can see where are Bicky stations in relation to areas that are, higher or lower income areas where there's clusters of, in this case, HUD public housing sites. So you can see, obviously, the Bicky stations are all concentrated in the Waikiki area, but not up in this area, where this could be expanded and have a use in this area. So you can take these off. You can put on, in terms of food, you can overlay this with food access. So this is a combination of PolicyMap data and local data. So farmers market, it comes from PolicyMap, grocery retail locations, and SNAP retail locations, they all come from PolicyMap. And then the food banks and food pantries are locally provided data sets from Hawaii. So here you can see, if I zoom in further in this area here, we've got these large public housing sites in this area where 301 families are at less than 125% of the federal poverty level. And within this area, we have these food pantry sites. So here's a public housing location. However, it does not have refrigeration or a kitchen or food prep area. And so you can see, where are there areas of need, and then within those areas, what assets do we have, or what assets don't we have, where we should be targeting these areas more effectively. And I'll pause there for questions before we move on. So this is one example of something that we can do to create a public-facing mapping tool. A lot of data that we provide already that's automatically updated in the tool, combined with your own data sets. We create the mapping tool. It's hosted on PolicyMap. We send a line of HTML code, which is used to then embed the map into your website like this.
And I'll touch on one more thing if there are no questions just yet for that mapping tool, just to illustrate the variety of data that we could process for you as well. Here on the data team at PolicyMap. So not only, as Tom was mentioning, can we, of course, integrate your own data, whether that be program data, if you want to use it for either targeting vulnerable communities, or if you wanted to use it for a reporting out tool as well. But we can also, so we can layer data just like these food pantries, which are point data sets. We can create aggregations of your data. A lot of our clients pursue that option for issues of data anonymity or things like that nature, depending on the communities you're working with. But we can also process spatial data if you have things like shapefiles and other aggregations that you'd like to see on your map that you currently use in-house. So I'll layer one example of that, reminding me of our conversation last week, Ramona, talking about kind of cross-sector collaboration again. This one I thought was really cool, and it was from the recommendation of the Department of Health. They wanted to see as well, not only where food pantries and food banks are available, but thinking about, at another point in that junction, where is land being used for agricultural uses and what's being produced. So although I'm sure a lot of that is being created for export in your state, it might be helpful to see, if we're looking at a feeding program and we want to make sure that people in this community have access to fresh food, where is food actually being grown in our county and in our state? So this is an example. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, which is kind of a complex spatial data set that we're able to layer onto these tools as well. So you can see the diversity of what is being grown in your state, parcel by parcel basis, and you can see here in the legend like what categories have been included as well. And that might be helpful to start to think about this full pipeline of problem to problem solving as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I invite you, I'm sure many of you already know about this mapping tool, but I invite you to go in and try this out. We have many, many more examples of these mapping tools. that are used for different purposes. Opportunity zone, I believe, is, a hot topic, and so we've got, consultants that have opportunity zone mapping tools as well. That's a layer that's in PolicyMap that's not yet in this mapping tool that could be added, and I'll go into more detail with that as well. So let me go back to, so basically, as I mentioned, all of these mapping tools reside on this nationwide platform that's available through a subscription. So Hawaii Department of Health has 10 users that have access to this nationwide tool, but then they also present the public-facing tool in addition to that. So I will just go ahead and you'll notice here that there is a free public version that provides access to much of the data in PolicyMap and the ability to view it on the map. And then there's a subscriber option that provides more functionality, such as the ability to generate instant reports in any area, or download data, or upload your own data into PolicyMap. So I invite you to check out the public version, but in the meantime, I'll go ahead and log into what we call PolicyMap proper. So I guess the mothership. So I apologize that it defaults to the continental United States. You'll see that we can have an instance of this that would default to the Hawaiian Islands. So I will go ahead and just type that in here now. You do matter, Alaska does matter, Puerto Rico matters. Okay, so once again, I'll just zoom into a specific area. I just find this more interesting when you get to a more local level. And so in the main version of PolicyMap, let's go full screen here. This data is available nationwide, so when you load a layer, you're loading it for the entire nation at once. So you can go anywhere in the country and view the same data. And it's organized in these menus you see across the top. There are other functionalities such as 3-layer maps. So you can find areas to meet multiple criteria, such as where are there opportunity zones that have the greatest social need. You can do that through the 3-layer maps. But in the maps page, all the information is organized in these menus, from demographics over to analytics. If you're not sure where to find something, so for example, let's say you wanted to find SNAP food locations, you can just type in the search bar and you can see all the different variations of SNAP retail locations or aggregate SNAP data. How many redemptions are there in a specific area? How many stores are there in a specific area, et cetera. But otherwise, under these menus, you see all these categories. And within each menu, as you mouse over it, you'll see subcategories of data. So for example, under people with disabilities, you can look at percent of population or count of people with a disability based on their age, their employment status, their income status, look at concentrations of veterans by poverty status, by foreign-born status, immigration data. And so all these menus work the same way. We have household types, household sizes, et cetera. And then under the income tab, we've got people in poverty by age, by race, by veteran status. We have persistent poverty areas, families in poverty. We just updated our IRS tax data set. So this is information from all the tax returns filed nationwide. So where there are people that are claiming more child care tax credits or education tax credits or housing. And then we have some data such as food insecurity, WIC and SNAP information in here as well. So I'll go through these tabs very briefly, and then I'll show you some of the functionality in this tool. So under the housing tab, we have a new data set from Zillow. So we have all the home sale data. What's the median home sale price for an area, or how's that changing over time. We have home value. We have rental unit information. And then actually thinking about Tony's comment, we have things like age of home here. So, you know, if you've got a energy efficiency program, we'd be targeting areas where there's a lot of older homes, housing quality information. Somewhere in here we have home heating fuel type that might be under a different menu.
Might be quality of life or economy, essentially.
Lending, I won't go into too much detail. And actually within any of these menus, you'll see the first two columns are data layers. So this is aggregate data, like we showed you on the Hawaii site. The third column are data points. So these are all the nationwide locations of specific assets. So in the case of housing, we have all the low-income housing tax credit locations, public housing, multifamily housing sites. So if you want to look at things like Section 202, senior housing, we have that in here as well. Under the lending tab, and again, this is stemming from our origins as a division of the CDFI ourselves. We have all the mortgage lending data nationwide from the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. So where is there more high-cost mortgage lending happening, predatory lending, mortgages by race, ethnicity, and then we have, you know, if you're looking to partner perhaps with a CDFI locally, we have all the certified CDFIs in your area, as well as FDIC, bank branch offices, credit unions, and so on. Under the quality of life tab, we have crime data from the FBI. We've got new data sets that are pretty interesting. We've a new internet access data set. This is from the latest Census American Community Survey data. So if you're trying to identify areas where they don't have computers or their only access is through a smartphone and they don't have a computer in their house, you can view that. That might help target your outreach efforts. And then we have Social Vulnerability Index was recently added. This is data from CDC. And so this looks at different aspects of vulnerability, from housing and transportation to minority status, household composition, socioeconomic status, and overall vulnerability. We have USDA food desert data in here, farmers markets in this tab, and then of course we have of particular interest to you would be the I'm sorry, from the health tab. I'm jumping ahead. We have SNAP retail locations, farmers markets in here as well. And I'll show you how some of this works because I think you'd really like the nonprofit locations data set as well. Under the economy tab, we have, this is your workforce data set. So you can look at jobs and workforce data, both in terms of where workers reside as well as where they are employed by industry sector, by earnings and education, or by demographics. We have jobs by industry. We're adding more infrastructure data, so deficient bridges. We've got power plants in here as well. Actually, back in the economy tab, we have environment data. So we have brownfield Superfund sites. You know, for disaster planning, that would be of interest. We have FEMA disaster declaration areas as well. Under the education tab, we have all the public school data nationwide, down to an individual school level as well as district level. Educational attainment by race. We've got colleges, universities, Head Start centers, public libraries in this tab. And under the health tab, we have chronic conditions. Much of this is down to a census tract level. And this is from the CDC Behavior Risk Factor Surveillance System data set. And we also have the CDC 500 cities data as well. We have life expectancy data was recently added to PolicyMap. We have mortality data, drug overdose data, some of this data was added as the result of customer requests. So one example is USDA Rural Development has access to PolicyMap nationwide for all of its 50 state offices. So if you know anyone in the Hawaii office, they would have access through USDA Rural Development, and they were interested in adding opioid data because we also loaded all of their housing data, and they wanted to see areas where they had excess housing that could possibly be redeployed as transitional housing to address the opioid epidemic in rural areas. And then we have access to health insurance, the insured and uninsured population. We have Medicare population, as well as access to medical care. And then we have all the hospitals, we have community health centers and lookalikes, mental health treatment facilities, drug and alcohol treatment facilities, retail-based healthcare, grocery retail locations. Almost done. Federal guidelines, so this is where you have your opportunity zones. And we have supplemented that with other measurements for those opportunity zone areas. We also have CRA eligible areas. This is the data set we just updated today from HUD for 2018, the CDBG data set. We have different fair housing measurements, such as racially, ethnically concentrated areas of poverty. Then we have historic tax credit projects, FEMA disaster declaration, and so on. And finally, under the analytics tab, we have a separate division of reinvestment fund as a policy research group, and they do market value analyses for different cities that commission those studies. We have a nationwide limited supermarket access study, and then we have the social needs index, which ranks on the scale of 1 to 10 based on various criteria, areas that were originally eligible for the Opportunity Zone program but not selected. What is their degree of social need? So let me show you how this works. So let's say, for example, under housing, we would like to look at cost burdens, renter cost burdens, extremely cost burdened renters. So you can see it's very fast. When you have a data layer, there is a map title. So we're looking at estimated percentage of all renters who are severely cost burdened. When you click the map title, we write descriptions for all the data sets. And so this explains that extremely severely cost burdened means that renters are paying at least 50% of their income towards rent. So that's less money to use for food, for healthcare, possibly target areas for this. You can change the indicators. So here on the left, you see a legend. This shows the source of the data. So this is coming from the census, coming from the latest census data, which is the American Community Survey data, which is through 2017. And you can change the view from the percent to the actual estimated count of renters who are severely cost burdened, or the percent change over time. Are there more cost burdened renters in the past 5 years? Are there less? This would show you that. If we change this to number, you can see that the darker areas have more cost burdened renters. So if I scroll over here, you can overlay this with data points. So let's say that under the housing tab, again, you'd like to overlay this with HUD multifamily housing locations. So you can see this comes from a few different HUD databases, their contracts database. And you can see all these diamonds are HUD multifamily housing sites. So here is a 60 6 resident sites. I always pick ones that I can't pronounce. Malulani. And so this has information on, assisted living facility appears, and the demographics of the residents and the physical inspection stores. So when you have these point data sets, you can filter or color code them. So in this case, let's color code by number of units. So you can see if I zoom in here, that there are these blue diamonds, which are these larger sites. And by the way, if you're sick of PolicyMap purple, you can change the colors. Color ramp on the map. So I'm going to change this to kind of a more neutral green color. And so, when I click on this area here, you can see that there are 100 in this block group. You can see I'm zoomed into a block group level. There are 174 severely burdened renters in this area, and then how it compares up to the nation. So in Honolulu County, there are 39,000 renters who are paying at least 50% of their income towards rent each month. 10 million in the nation. If I wanted to see a listing of all the HUD multifamily housing sites here, I can click see list. It pulls up a table with all that data from all those sites, and you can then download and export this as an Excel doc. So you can overlay this with other assets. So for example, under the quality of life tab, we have this nonprofit locations tab. And so this looks like a mess because this is every type of nonprofit. This is from the National Center for Charitable Statistics, the Urban Institute. If you click on any of these links, it will take you to the data directory with more information about the data, how we curate the data, how current the data is, and then a link out to the source website. But again, here, if I minimize this, I can filter these nonprofits by subject area. So let's say I would like to look at nonprofits that deal specifically with housing and shelter. And so now you can see, here are areas where there's a lot of cost burden renters, and within the area here we have, for example, the IHS Institute for Human Services. So we can upload, your own data sets. I believe you have your own local source of nonprofits, and we could upload that and then also create different filtering options like this against your own data sets. I'm going to zoom out here. So let me just take off the nonprofits and show you some other functionality here. So in this area, we've got all these severely cost burdened renters. And let's say that we want to see if where are the opportunity zones? Because there's sudden emphasis by all federal agencies to focus efforts in opportunity zones. So again, this is under federal guidelines. We can go to opportunity zone designated tracks. So you can see this area here is all a designated opportunity zone. You can see it's basically this is a yes/no data layer. So any investments in this area, have the incentive of not paying capital gains tax over time, among other tax incentives. But then also under analytics, we have the social needs index. Okay, so again, the social needs index, we're looking at ranking of social needs for opportunity zone eligible tracts. And again, this is for all tracts that were originally eligible to be opportunity zone, but not necessarily those that were selected. When you click on the map title, this explains that The social needs index takes into consideration population below poverty, households with rent or mortgages greater than 30% of income, population not in the labor force, population with less than a high school degree, and index of concentrated income. And so basically on a scale of 1 to 10, you can see here in the legend, the darker areas have a higher social need. And so you can see this area here has the highest social need. It's on a scale of 10, it's a 10 out of 10, and for these reasons. 58% poverty. We don't have the home ownership data for some reason in this area. Renters who are burdened, how many people are not in the labor force, et cetera. So interestingly enough, if you take a look at this census tract here, which is the highest social need, and if I go back to the opportunity zone layer, this layer is not designated as an opportunity zone, even though it has the highest social need. So I found that to be interesting.
Can you zoom in on that? Yeah, can you zoom in on that real quick?
Yeah.
And there's a side-by-side satellite view here. If I click satellite, you can see the side-by-side satellite.
All right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, we were asking that question ourselves, why it was an opportunity zone, but I think they figured that it was being redeveloped. But 20.
Interesting.
So, you know, let's look at, so let's say you want to look at this area as a whole, kind of get a snapshot of this area. Again, opportunity zones are census tract level. So if I click on an area here, you can see this is a census tract. If you wanted to overlay to see where the census tract boundaries are, on the bottom here are map boundaries. And so you can overlay, you know, congressional districts or zip codes or census tracts to see where these census tracts are. And so this whole area here is a designated opportunity zone. If I take this off, the other thing you can do is, notice when I click on an area, there's a get report link. So you can get an instant report on any area that you click. Or if I wanted to assemble this all as one area and then just look at this whole area together, on the bottom here, there's a custom region tool, so you can draw your own area on the map or assemble. So let's say I would assemble this area here. And hopefully there's not too many. Oh, there we go. So let's say I wanted to take a look at all this. You could freehand draw instead, or you can do a radius around a specific address. I'm going to save this as make up a name. You can put a description in here. If you've got several custom regions, you can make these different colors. So let's say I want to make this more pronounced with a red boundary. And so now this is stored under my custom regions. So you can come back to this later. You can share this custom region with other users, so they'll see this in their list without them having to create it themselves. And then you can click on this little icon, and you can download whatever you have on the map. So if you want to see, in this case, all the HUD multifamily, you can, but I'm going to just show you a report. So you can click Get Report. And there are 4 different types of reports in PolicyMap. The one that probably would be of best interest is the community profile report, although the housing report, this is a mortgage report, might be of interest. We have a community health report, which is very lengthy. It has not only health, but social determinants of health, such as housing, education, risk factors. This is currently only county level, but we will soon be releasing a neighborhood level version of this. So stay tuned. But I'm going to do a community profile report on my custom region, Honolulu zone, opportunity zone number 1, and show you what's in one of these reports. And so this report pops up, and it has basic information about the congressional district, the state district, population trends. So this area is trending up in population, 33% growth compared to 13% for the county and 17% for the state. Here's your race ethnicity breakdown. 54% Asian population in this area, as well as count by race. Each section shows where the data is coming from, so this is census data. Here's your age breakdown for this area. So it looks like this area has a higher percentage of working age population compared to the state level. Here's your income breakdown for this area. So 620 households earn less than $25,000 a year, 25% compared to 13% for the county. So we've got 36% foreign-born population. We get this from census and green card data from Homeland Security.
Wow.
Here's a family structure for this area. So in this area, we've got 310 households that are single or single with children, or single female-headed households with children. Here's your housing stock for this area. So most people live in small or large apartment buildings in this area. And fairly low home ownership rate, 22% home ownership rate in this area. This is an example of a data set that we license and we make available to all of our subscribers. This is a company called Velastis that maintains the largest direct mail database in the country. So all that junk mail you get every night when you go home, basically this is non-delivery of mail after 90 days for residents and businesses. You see vacancy is fairly low and pretty steady. And this is updated every quarter, so as of 2018 Q4. We have employment data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's updated every month. And then job breakdown by industry in this area, in your opportunity zone area. So a lot of hospitality workers and retail workers. And then crime data, this is county level, it's not down to the neighborhood, but we include this as well. So you can generate these reports, and then we also can create custom reports. So, you know, what are the 5 things you always look at when you're looking at a neighborhood? And that can be a combination of PolicyMap data and your data. So I just talked a lot more, so I'll see if there's any questions at this point. So yes, I mean, some other functionality here on the upper right. There's a print option. So if you wanted to save this as a PowerPoint or a PDF or a PNG file, print lets you put this into a print preview window. You can reposition the map, and then you can, you know, change the title of the map if you want. You can include the data layer description. Now we have the data layer description on the map, print margins, and then you can export this as a visual file. Or you can download the data. So if you wanted to download any underlying data in PolicyMap, not just opportunity zone, but any data, you can download data as a CSV file and then use that in other tools. You can share this map. Oh, now it's custom region. So let me take this off.
Although you can share a custom region directly.
Yeah. So here, if I wanted to email this map to somebody else, you can enter their email address, type in some explanatory text, they'll get an email, they click on the link, it puts them into this exact interactive map at the Zoom level with this data layer loaded, so they can view that in a free version of PolicyMap. You can embed this map yourself into an e-newsletter or a website, or of course, social media. All right, so I'll show you one other thing here, and whoever's interested, we could also provide, trial access to the full subscriber version of PolicyMap. So just keep that in mind. For that, we would just need a listing of names and email addresses, and your email address would be your login, and you'll receive an email with login instructions, and you'd have access to everything I'm showing you here, so you can evaluate further. I'll show you 3-layer maps, and then I'll show you some examples of cities and how we've loaded a lot of their own data into PolicyMap. So I'll just show you 3-layer maps very quickly. So we've been in just the Maps tab up to this point. You can see up here, reports I showed you, 3-layer map. So all these menus are exactly the same. The difference is that you are identifying areas that meet multiple criteria. So for example, let's say, and I'm totally making this up, under demographics, let's look at, let's say, race. Let's look at non-white population. So the map is purple because it's showing areas where between 0 and 100% of the population is non-white. So you can either use the slider or type in a value to identify areas. So I changed it to 50%, still pretty distant. So now once I go to 75%, you can see how the areas change.
That's why, yes.
Yeah. Not the most exciting example. But then let's say something like for data layer 2, and actually I'm going to change this. I'm going to get rid of this. Let's go back to people with disabilities. To say all. Let's say we're at least 15% of the population. Disabled. That's probably a little too aggressive. Let's say 10%. And then data layer 2, let's say under housing, let's say cost burdens. Let's go back to our cost burden example, where at least 30% of renters are cost burdened. And so the map shows areas that meet 2 criteria. You can click on an area to see why it does. So this area has 11% disability, and 52% of renters are cost burdened. And then you do a third data set, let's say households without a vehicle. And I never remember where that is, so I'm just going to type in vehicle here. Here's estimated percentage of housing units for which no vehicles are available. And let's make that 15%. So at any time you can change these around and experiment. And so here you can see this area has 38% of households have no vehicle, 60% of renters are cost burdened, and you can change it from percent to number like we did before, and then people with disability. So up here, an area where it's further out, and 17% of households there don't have a vehicle. And then you can still overlay this with point data sets. So for example, under the health tab, let's look at grocery retail locations. So this is another data set that we licensed from Nielsen. And here you can filter or color code by grocery retail type. So it's great that there's all these stores here, but how many are really like dollar stores or small, or what are called superettes? So you can color code these and see that, you know, here's an area where the closest full-service supermarket is this Times supermarket in this area. You can overlay it with housing locations, multifamily housing locations, hospitals. You can put your hospitals on here as well. So just mix and match. So here's your hospitals. Okay. So that's, you know, PolicyMap. This is the information that's all in PolicyMap already nationwide. So you can go in and look through these tabs and see what data sets might be of interest for some type of mapping tool. And then as examples of kind of city instances, so you can think of this on a state basis perhaps. So we've got a few cities that have citywide access to PolicyMap for all of their departments. It allows us to upload data from different departments that was previously inaccessible from other departments to access in one place. So in the city of Philadelphia, they have their own URL, just philip@policymap.com. They have access to all the data that's in PolicyMap nationwide, so that these are all the same. And then we've replaced the My Data tab with this Philly Data tab. And so we've uploaded about 150 local administrative data sets into PolicyMap. So, you know, every city has a great open data portal. It's basically a laundry list of data sets. Click here to download crime data. Click here to download city council district boundaries. So here we made it all available in one place, and it functions the same way as PolicyMap data. So we have building condition data, we have licenses and permits, we have foreclosure and displacement information, evictions, housing vouchers, things like child care data, opportunity index. They have a our policy group does a displacement risk ratio, so they look at, you know, gentrification and trends in the area to see if there's a risk for further displacement. And then we've added all the city real estate listings, commercial corridors, HUD programs. So there's choice, neighborhood boundaries, promise zones. Philly has promise zones. Racially and ethnically concentrated area of poverty overlay. We have heating and energy. So here is your weatherization projects, your heater hotline, counseling and foreclosure information. We have also the bike share, like we have the Diki stations in Honolulu. We've got the called Indigo in Philadelphia. Here we have somewhere with green roofs. We have storm sewer data, zoning data. So this is all available in one place. So for example, under sales activity, median sales price for residential properties. So we have home sale data from Zillow nationwide, but this is actually from the city's own source, which is the Office of Property Assessment. And so this is the median sales price. And the problem that Philadelphia had was, well, many problems, but one of the problems Philadelphia has is there are 4 different housing agencies that don't necessarily communicate very well. The Housing Development Corporation, the Land Bank, the Redevelopment Authority, and the Public Housing Authority. So where are they working on top of each other in some places, and where are other places being completely ignored? And so here you can color code by agency. So when I zoom in, there are 40,000 vacant properties in Philadelphia, and this helps them to prioritize, you know, here's an area where, you know, the median sales price is higher than surrounding areas, so perhaps all these properties that the city owns in this area, they could dispose of on the open market, versus these areas up here where these are highly distressed areas, where perhaps these could be like sidewalk or community garden programs, are treated differently up there. This area here is a very hot area, fastest growing area. It's called Northern Liberty. So they've got all these properties here. They could just download the listing and export that. So that's one example. And another one, which kind of is, after talking with Raquel, might be an interesting option is, so for City of Memphis, also has a big blight problem. And so rather than having this tool that's only accessible by city employees, we created this site, Memphis Fights Blight. And this is accessible by different stakeholder organizations. So community, nonprofits, government groups working together to address blight in Memphis. And so this is a login site, but there's an administrator at Memphis that basically assigns IDs to whoever asks for it for this initiative. So they've got about 400 users so far. So this could be another option for presenting large amounts of data on a broader scale. So again, they have access to everything in PolicyMap, the national data sets, and then we have this Memphis data tab instead. And so for Memphis, they've done a video survey of every one of its business and residential properties, 380,000 approximately, that we uploaded into their instance of PolicyMap. So if I load one of these data sets and hold on to your seat, because this will look very busy, and it takes a couple of seconds because it's pretty large. So I call this the beehive. They have a remarkable data collection, but all this data just sat in a huge spreadsheet. You couldn't see where any of this was on the map. So this is a great example of filtering options where you can filter or color code by, you know, is it business or residence, how delinquent are they in taxes, the land use or occupancy, is it vacant, service requests, so how many complaints have they called into the city about that property. So, I mean, Raquel, you were mentioning things like the community college program and doing a survey of restaurants. You know, perhaps something like that could be uploaded and then create filters for that. So one example is they have a rating, so on a scale of 1 to 5, it's kind of a reverse scale, 5 being the worst shaped properties. And then let's further limit this to only those residential versus industrial properties. And also under the location bar, you can zoom directly to a neighborhood or a city council district or planning district using these menus. But then overlaying this with a data set from PolicyMap, let's look at under housing, home ownership rate. You know, so basically, where are there problem properties in a neighborhood that is, in this case, stable because it's got a higher home ownership rate, such as this area here. You know, so we've got these properties, these 5 properties that probably should be prioritized, and you can download that list. But if you click on one of these, this is very cool. So all this information about this property, there is a photo of the property.
Wow. Really?
And then, you know, all this information about how much is owed in taxes. Here's the property tax records, code violations in here as well. So this area, this, you know, property is $5,500 delinquent in taxes. We're looking at more things that we're adding, like they really want to identify kind of absentee investors that aren't even from the United States. They're just buying up these properties and sitting on them, and how can they track these people down? So we're adding things like that for them as well. So this is another option. It's an option where it's not public facing, but the only barrier is, you know, you needed a login ID. But in this case, it's open. So, you know, different stakeholder organizations between health, housing, planning, community development could access this tool. And then we replace the My Data tab with a lot of, I mean, they can accommodate a lot of data sets of your own local data. So, hopefully I didn't totally inundate you with too many examples and options, but
It's over.
pretty flexible.
Yeah. Tom, I want to ask you that question. You know, you had mentioned that Memphis and the low-income housing tax credit. So for the affordable housing issue on that, you said that they were able to identify the low-income housing tax credit projects, and therefore a service provider could step in and then work with the families who on home ownership. Is that translatable to other communities? Yeah, like Hawaii.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out which one of these tabs. Here we go. So I'm going to go back to, now I'm here back to regular PolicyMap now, so I'm going to just clear off some of these locations. And I'm sorry, clear off some of these data sets. Zoom out here a little bit. So yeah, under housing, we have the low-income housing tax credit data set, or LIHTC, it's pronounced. And so here are all the LIHTC properties. You have to click on one of these, you can see information on this particular project. We also have, you know, when is it due to exit the program? That was a big concern with USDA with their housing is they couldn't figure out when things were going to leave the program, and when that happens, what impact is that going to have on housing affordability in that area. So like that report that I showed you, we created a custom report for them specifically for that purpose. But yeah, you could say, okay, here's the LIHTC properties, and now I want to look at under the lending tab, you know, I want to see if there's any CDFI that I can work with. And so here is Habitat for Humanity loan fund, you know, is one possibility. And then you can also overlay nonprofit locations, and those specifically that work with housing. Here's another one, another CDFI, the Hawaii Community Lending, Inc.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you could also say, I want to look at under quality of life, let's put nonprofits on here, and let's filter this by housing, shelter. So, you know, and this is even without a data layer on here, but here's a foundation for fundation. I guess that's intentional, foundation. Although this is smaller. So you could further filter by, I'm going to collapse some of these, and further filter by, let's say, total revenue. So those that have a revenue of $500,000 or more, And so now these are the larger housing nonprofits, Hawaii Civic Service Incorporated, and their finances.
So just another question. Let's say that the Hawaii Food Bank is looking for another place to do warehouse its, store its food. Do you have commercial data there that shows where there may be opportunities for a warehouse?
That's the kind of thing that we definitely custom process for clients all the time. If you were to have a statewide inventory, for example, but we don't have a property by property assessment inventory for parcels like that nationwide. No. If I'm understanding your question correctly, like where might there be a for sale warehouse available for that use?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's great data to have. I mean, if you have access to any of that kind of data, we're happy to load it to your tool or to your subscription. But unfortunately, that's not something that we're able to access nationwide right now.
If we give you data, who owns the data? Do we still own it, or does ownership kind of confer? How does that work?
You definitely own the data, and we are very careful to stick with your requests in terms of privacy and access. When you load your own data, it's available originally only to you, to the actual individual that's uploading it. If you choose to share it within your subscription or to specific emails, you're welcome to do that. As Tom mentioned, some of our larger clients and customers, for example, USDA, they often will provide us data and then want it to be publicly available. So we do have that ability. But the default is to keep your data only personally accessible to you. We also deal with a lot of data that people want to keep private, again, for issues of anonymization, especially if you're dealing with sensitive, housing data. For example, I just processed some data recently for a housing development corporation. They have a lot of address level eviction data, which obviously they don't want publicly accessible. So we worked out different aggregation levels for them. So instead of publishing a point level data set saying at this address there was an eviction filing last year, we instead aggregated it to the census tract and zip code level. So in this census tract, 3% of homeowners faced eviction filings last year versus an address by address level.
Right. Do you happen to have data on environment like water quality, air quality, something like that?
We showed in the quality of life tab. Do you know that specifically, Tom?
I don't believe that we have that. We can check that, but we have a climate index.
Trying to think. I might be thinking of a more localized data set related to that. There are some. I don't think that we do right now. I can verify that for you. Again, that might be the kind of thing that would be locally available that we could process, but not nationally.
And
How
then,
about,
go ahead. Sorry.
oh, real quick, how about setting up a routine like master transfer, a file transfer with you folks? Can you set that up if you wanted to? If that data continuously changes?
Yeah, we do a direct data feed. So we did that with Philadelphia for the real estate. City-owned properties is updated every night, and we're doing that now with Dallas. It's another recent citywide. So yeah, we can set up those feeds. And
then in the opposite direction, we do often set up contracts for API access for our clients as well. So that's a different type of subscription purchase, but we do set up a relationship where you'd have online API access to our database on a piece-by-piece basis as well.
And then I saw a question from Heather asking about, can you just download a listing of the lifetime properties and then see, the listing by expiration date. So you can do that. You can export the data in Excel. So for example, if I click on one of these, all this information that's in this spreadsheet, this info bubble will be a row on an Excel doc. And then to do that, what I didn't show you is the download feature. So let's say, for example, in this case, for whatever reason, I want to download, let's say income, let's say household income. So right now I have on the map the household income layer, and then I have the point data set for the LIHTC properties. And on the upper right here, you see this download data button. And so when you click on this download data button, it'll ask you a few things. So do you just want to download the underlying layer data? So in this case, we're looking at household income. Or do you want to download the point data set, which downloads all the LIHTC properties and all that information associated with each property, including the expiration date, or a combination? Where there is a LIHTC, what is the household income level for the area in which that LIHTC property sits? So you can do a combination of point and layer. You say next. So you can download for the nation, you can download for a state, you can download for a county, or even a region. And so here, let's say we want to look at census tract level income data, confirm your download. So here we're going to download the combination. So estimated income of the household between, well, the most recent census data for LIHTC properties. And then at this point, you can download that file. And this will pop up in your browser when it's ready, and also be emailed to you as an Excel attachment. So hopefully, Heather, that answers your question. Yes. And actually, on the side note, Heather, not to put you on the spot, but LISC subscribes to PolicyMap. We've got a few folks from each of the 3 organizations under LISC, and we also created a mapping tool for them, if I can remember where it is. I must have lost it. But anyway, I can, if Ramona sends your contact information, I can make introductions to the folks at LISC that have access to PolicyMap.
Any questions?
One quick question. So if there was data like the Department of Health injury crash rate or from would that be something that would be customizable that you would add on, but not something that would be on the general version? Is that basically how it would work?
So you want to repeat it?
Yeah, sorry. Just a question. So the general policy map would be just all the national data, and then to customize it, that's any of that kind of information would be customizable, and then it's restricted to whoever purchases it? Is that how
if they want to?
Okay.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, so if you had a regular subscription to PolicyMap, you'd be using this main PolicyMap proper, as Tom described. And then anything that's your data, your organization's data, whether you're uploading it or whether we're processing it for you, will live in this first tab, which is called My Data. So again, Tom gave the example of the Philadelphia. That's a little bit more built out, and cross-sector type of multiple groups are using that, so it's organized just like a data menu. But here's what a typical My Data menu would look like, and this is any data that's tied to you and your organization, and that doesn't show up for other users that aren't under your subscription.
Okay. So if it was a
Does that
government,
answer your question?
yeah, I guess if it's government data, it's just whoever owns the license would have it. It's not available to the general public.
Correct, and we can limit that as much or as little as you'd like. For example, if this does work out where Hawaii wants to use PolicyMap across all these different sectors to collaborate, but you do have 1 or 2 data sets that are really quite private and you really only want them available to you and your teammate, we can designate which email logins are able to see that when they log in. And we can also do the opposite. We can say anyone that's using the Hawaii.gov subscription can view this when they log in. So however wide or narrow you would like that net to be cast, we can accommodate that for you.
Any other questions? Comments?
You said the healthcare data is, you're working on getting it down to a census tract level or at least less than county. Do you have a timeline for that?
We're hoping for the end of Q2 of this year. So hopefully in the next few months or so. We're going through validation right now and validating our data with our web developers. So it's definitely in process, and it has been in process for a few months at this point. And it really just depends on the validation process as it continues. But it's something that we're hoping for Q2 of this year.
Yeah, so we actually do have the data already. In some cases, down to a census tract, as you can see here for diabetes. It's just the report itself needs to be updated to be more granular. So that's what we're working on now, but the data is already in the
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So you will be able to pull any of those indicators that you see at the county level. They're still available for you on PolicyMap. You can still access them and download them. Just to echo Tom, it's just not in the report format just yet.
All the data you have up here, it's all quantitative, right? You don't have any like qualitative data, nothing from surveys?
Not exactly like survey data. We do have categorical layers, similar to the way that Tom showed the opportunity zones. We have things like yes, no, and he's showing right now a few examples of survey respondents that are more about perception in the healthcare data. So this is a CDC versus study that's survey respondents on mental health in the past 30 days, or this one in particular is physical health. So we have a few things like that, but overall our data is quantitative. And then if you wanted to see some of the categorical data, that would live, a lot of it would live in our federal guidelines data as well as our analytics data.
And actually on a side note, to the survey question, so here's another really interesting example of a public-facing mapping tool. So it's Get Georgia Reading. They're focused on improving third grade reading proficiency statewide for Georgia. And so we created this mapping tool here, creatively called Mapping and Reporting Tool. And so there is survey data in here that I think is presented in a pretty cool way. And we're in the process of not talking and typing at the same time, updating this with the client. We have a customer report as well, but here are all the schools, but then they had a questionnaire with the Georgia Department of Education, so they can color code by things like percent of students answering always or often to I like school, percentage or answering always or often to I feel safe at school. And so now here you can see the red schools are schools where students don't feel as safe. You can click on the school for more information and then overlay that with all this data. So for example, under education, we have students withdrawing from school, which is a Georgia Department of Education data set. So you can see here we have higher students withdrawing from school, and also from the questionnaire, students don't feel safe in school. And here you can click and generate a school district level report. So it has all of these schools benchmarking information. So what schools are in the top band, top performing band, or lowest performing band. And you can click and download all the school data from within the report. So, you know, a lot we can do with survey data if you have it.
Any other questions, or do you have any other questions on the phone too, Tom?
Yes. Nothing from here. I know a couple folks have left, so I think.
So what shall we do as next steps Shall I, I'm assuming that everybody wants to do a trial. And so I'll just make sure that I got the correct email address and send that to you. Is that right? Everybody wants to do that? Okay.
Hi, Tom and Ramona. This is Beth and Hilo. Hi. I've already had it, and I'm sorry to say it was done, and I loved it. Just letting everybody know.
Thank you, Beth.
Oh, Beth, thank you.
Hi.
So Beth is with the County of Hawaii. No, Beth. Elizabeth Dykstra, and she's with the Department of Research and Development. And so one of the things that we're hoping that they could do is utilize that in their recovery mode, because it provides a lot of resource information that would help them in terms of the redevelopment of.
One more question.
Yeah.
So has,
You want to do loud?
sorry. Has the PolicyMap been used at all for like resiliency planning or sea level rise, and because we do have some really good layers ourselves with that.
Great. Yeah, we definitely have. I just built a tool in the last few months for the emergency management team, the state of Rhode Island, for example. They're really interested in not only seeing like FEMA declarations of disasters in the past dozen or so years, but also we have USGS source data on floodplains, floodplain mapping, waterways, things like that. So any shape files or raster files that you're working with to understand environmental resilience, at least, we can definitely load that into a tool or into your My Data tabs as well.
And I was just trying to find it here. We can send you the link to that.
I don't think they've published that one publicly.
Yeah, there's one on the blog. But yeah, we'll send you that example. And then also a commercial for our next public webinar. And so those are more formal listen-only webinars. But we have one coming up on March 21st of the people, for the people, using data for good government. And we have guest presenters for these webinars. And this one was really exciting because Raquel Favela from the National Development Council will be presenting. And she actually at the time was head of the housing and redevelopment for the city of Dallas, which is setting up its own PolicyMap tool now. And then Steve Barlow from Neighborhood Preservation, who was the one who spearheaded the Memphis Property Hub, which is that big property data set that we showed you. And then also Bryce from the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. So we can send out a link to register for this session as well.